All right, welcome everybody. And thank you so much for your patience today as we get going with our meeting, and welcome to the Reform Gravel Mining Online Rally North Edition. Just before we get started, I'm just going to go over some Zoom tips. So because it's a large meeting, we will have you muted for this meeting. However, we do encourage you to use the chat. So please feel free to use the chat. We will also have live transcript available. You will see that in the closed captioning button at the bottom. So just give that a press and you'll be able to read everything that's being said. And like I said, please use the chat and we'll get going with our meeting. So I'm going to hand it over to Katie, who will introduce Marilyn, who will be doing our land acknowledgement.
Hi, everyone. I am honored to introduce Elder Marilyn Capriel, who is Anishnaabe from Shawanaga First Nation in Ontario and is a founding member of the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership Elders Lodge. Marilyn was raised on the waters of Georgian Bay and is involved with the Georgian Bay Biosphere Reserve. So miigwech, Marilyn, for being here to open our meeting today and with your words in a good way. Over to you, Marilyn.
Me no Vic in a way. Navish Quater, Shnakars of Macquado down, Shawana Kudunchaba, Minute of Gumming. My name is Water. I sit in the lodge with the Bear family. My ancestral footprints on the land and paddle strokes on the water are those of the Ojibways of Shawanaga First Nation. Myself, I still live on the shores, the Great Lakes. I'd first like to acknowledge that our gift of tobacco has been put out to invite and guide us through the next day or so, but specifically this evening. And it was put high up off the ground, which is absolutely beautiful. So I say miigwech for honoring that ethical protocol. Today, like any day, is very special and extremely sacred. But as we acknowledge the land, it does not belong to the people. We are here to share it, to take care of it. So in acknowledging the land this day, I am responsible for acknowledging her work, Mother Earth. She is beginning to put on her dress for this governing moon. Washkanogesus. And what it means is flower moon. So during this time, right now, in every little crevice of rock, the tiniest bit of earth to support a happy face, a flower. It's all across this land right now. There are still flowers that come to sit with us for that sunshine months. And I still don't know who they are, their names, but I talk to them anyway. What we've been called to do here tonight to acknowledge the land is extremely important. I'm proud that the footprints of my people on the land and water, how they used them for the thousands of years, they left it totally intact for all that journey. We must be very careful in looking after grandmother in such a way that our great-grandchildren, grandchildren will have that pleasure of seeing that tiny bit of soil in the crack of a rock exist in their time. Those little flowers are so happy, and when they wake up in the morning, they unfold from the night's cold, and their faces shine, greeting grandfather, son, for that gratefulness. On the hills that could be destroyed of the territory that you are trying desperately to take care of, I think about the people, the Anishnaabe people, who cared for those lands, who birthed babies there, who put their dead to rest there. Gatherings happened. Maybe they wrote something somewhere on those rocks that could be destroyed in a strike of a moment. These are values that are to be put in your thoughts and shared with other people. The importance of leaving Earth Woman as she provided for us all those years. Can we sell her piece by piece? Do you have the right to break her body for money? To interrupt what she offers under that stone? There's still an ecosystem there that she takes care of. So I ask you to remember the tiniest face on the tiniest flower that comes to life every year, this time, never failed, never late, and does all that magic work. So with that, I would also like to say a great special thank you to our sacred and beautiful men for allowing us the ethical space of gathering and sitting as a family this evening, and how that ethical space is provided. It is between Earth Woman and Sky Man. Our voices are traveling across a place in between there called air. We hear each other. We might cry with each other. We might laugh with each other. The most significant thing is that the spirit of that tobacco is going to help us work with each other. So with that, my friends, I thank the ancestors, Mishomaskizes, Nokomaskizes, and Mishomas. Come and celebrate with us this evening. Let's have a good meeting and enjoy each other's time. Miigwech, 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 oh, miigwech.
Miigwech, Marilyn, your words are always so beautiful and so right on, and make the seasons come alive for me anyways. So welcome everyone who from all the different territories where you're coming from. My name is Katie Krelove. I work as the campaigner, Ontario campaigner for the Wilderness Committee, which is a national charity that works for people-powered protections for nature, wildlife, and climate. I'm actually coming to you today from the province known as British Columbia. As a visitor there, I'm in the Fraser Canyon on Enslakapen territory. Sorry, just learning it, which is near Lytton First Nation. And some of you may recognize the name Lytton as one of the places that was evacuated and from the terrible wildfires about a year ago. And so I'm honored to be here and actually got to meet with the chief of First Nation from Lytton today, and it was a great reminder of the responsibilities that we all have to address the climate crisis that we're in, which, the Reform Gravel Mining Committee is, taking on a little piece of. And I've got my co-host with me today. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Katie. I'm Mike Ball-Quill. I work with the Water Watchers in the same kind of people-powered protection work as Katie does. I also work with the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition as the campaign manager. I'm very pleased to be with you tonight. Back to you, Katie.
Great. Yeah, I mean, we have a jam-packed event for you tonight. This is one of a series of events that the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition has been putting on to bring people to understand and be aware of and learn about very local communities who are, fighting David and Goliath type fights in their communities against unnecessary and environmentally destructive and community destructive gravel pits and quarries in their communities. So I think, Mike, do you want to talk about how many of these have we held?
Well, you're going to make me count, are you? I think this is the third one. Fourth one.
Third one. And this is our North edition. And so we are featuring communities from the North today. But before we get into that and hearing from our communities, we do want to talk a little bit about what the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition is about and our current campaign, which is we refer to as the DAM campaign, because it's the Demand A Moratorium Now on new applications for gravel mines in Ontario. So Mike, do you want to introduce Graham?
I do. I'm going to introduce the video first, which is going to be followed by Graham Flint, who's going to speak to you and is a spokesperson for the DAM campaign. The video in which Graham narrates, excuse me, will orient you to the major issues of gravel mining in Ontario and why we believe a moratorium, a temporary pause, is necessary to stop and chart a new path. Graham will narrate the video, which you'll watch in just a moment, and then he'll speak to the issues. Graham has decades of experience involved in opposing gravel mining, and I know he's going to give you some more detail than I am about his background, but there may not be anybody who has as much experience in reviewing and talking to people across Ontario, groups like yours who have been engaged in opposition to a gravel mine. So in addition to being very knowledgeable, he's very articulate and handsome too. So I'm going to ask the people behind the scenes to press the button to play the video. And just before you go, if you have questions in watching the video or you have questions as Graham is speaking, please put your questions in the chat box and we'll try and take time. We should be sure to take time to speak to them.
We're in too deep. For decades, the gravel mining industry has blasted, dug, crushed, and trucked across Ontario with apparent impunity. And we've let them. Year after year, the leaders we've given the job of protecting our province to have handed them the shovels and said, go, dig more. Go dig over 5,000 enormous sites in our backyards. Go dig out 13 times more gravel every year than what we use. Go destroy 5,000 acres of land a year and take up to 4.6 billion liters of precious water every day. Go destroy the natural environment and damage our communities while paying less property tax than some single families do. Go accelerate the climate crisis by feeding sprawl, highways, cement production, transportation, and other massive causes of greenhouse gases. And finally, go do it all without any consent of First Nations, as our Constitution says you must. It's already too late for some communities, Those who bravely fought the impossible David versus Goliath battles, they rarely had a chance to win. This multinational, foreign-owned industry is so unchecked and self-regulated and so deep-pocketed that the moment you try to stop one site, another appears somewhere else. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to say enough. No more new sites, period. We, the people of Ontario, demand that our government impose an immediate moratorium on all new gravel mining approvals until an independent panel can chart a new path forward. One that will honor First Nations treaties and obligations, prevent more climate destruction, protect groundwater and farmland and endangered species, and give the communities dealing with these sites more say in how land use is decided. Sign the petition to demand a moratorium now at reformgravelmining.ca.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight. I hope you found that video as impactful as I do. Needless to say, I've seen it many, many times, but each time I listen to it, it really strikes me as sort of framing the nature of the problem that we have and what we need to do about it. As introduced, I have the honor to serve as a co-chair and spokesperson for the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. The primary partners, the coalition partners for the coalition are the Wilderness Committee, with Katie representing, Water Watchers with Mike and the team representing, Council of Canadians, and Environmental Defense. And we're proud to be able to say we have communities from about 38 communities across Ontario that have joined, and thousands of supporters that have signed up for us. And what we're really trying to do is to bring these issues, these issues about gravel mining that occur in local communities, and raise it to a level that it needs to be raised to in order to get provincial action against it. It's the province of Ontario that really sets the rules for gravel mining in Ontario. And that's where we have to put our pressure to make things fixed. Next slide, please. I've only got a few minutes with you here today. And as Mike says, I have lots to be able to tell you about. So I'm going to be kind of quick and kind of high level in that. This is an important topic, and your attendance here tonight shows us that you think it's an important topic as well. As Katie's introduced, gravel is not a benign activity. It is what it is. The roads that brought you to your home today are made of the product. Your buildings that you live in probably have gravel as part of its component, but it's not benign. It totally destroys the natural environment where it's extracted from, and it can damage communities and cause great harm. And it feeds a lot of the stuff in this age of enlightenment that we should be living in, with issues like climate change and sprawl, et cetera, and that we need to address. And currently it's being done in a way that's disrespectful to Indigenous communities and doesn't move us any further towards reconciliation. It's an industry out of control in many ways. You heard the statistic in the video. Right now, the province of Ontario has licensed the gravel mining industry to extract 13 times more gravel each year than we use. 13 times. That's a huge amount over, not twice what we use or 5 times or 10 times we use, but 13 times. And that extraction licensing that they've done represents over 300,000 acres in Ontario. If you think about the footprint of the greater of Toronto, of the GTA area, that's 2 Torontos across Ontario. And that footprint is growing all the time. We have, over the last 15 years, the amount of land that's disturbed in Ontario, that's dug up and destroyed, has grown by about 20%. And that's a net 20% growth. So any land that they've claimed to be rehabilitated and put back to a use other than gravel mining, subtracted from all the new scars that are put on Ontario. The march of this industry across Ontario is huge. And the sad fact about all this is that the amount of gravel that we consume every year has remained relatively flat, about 165 million tons per year. It goes up by 3 to 5% every year, or down 3 to 5%, but it remains incredibly flat. And what's interesting is we're always being told we're about to run out of gravel. That's the song of the industry, is that, oh my God, we're going to run out. And we have reports and documents going back 40 years with the same cry. In the last 2 decades, the population of Ontario has gone up by 25%, from about 12 million people to 15 million people. But that amount of aggregate we use has actually stayed very flat. And if you're really technical about it, in the last 10 years, it went down to about 158 million tons. So we've got this situation with an industry that's marching its way across Ontario, consuming vast amounts of land and really becoming more inefficient because the amount we use stays the same. Next slide, if you could, for me, please. So the solution, as you've already heard introduced, is our DAM campaign, Demand A Moratorium Now. Put a pause on new gravel approvals. It's a metaphor that's used an awful lot in the climate crisis, where the model is, or the metaphor is, an overflowing bathtub. And yes, you're going to have to deal with the water that's on the floor, and yes, you're going to have to try and drain the tub. But the very first thing you need to do is turn off the tap. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to get the tap turned off. And a moratorium will create that tension and that space for us to be able to do something about this runaway industry that we have in Ontario. It's not going to impact the supply of gravel we have in Ontario. Remember, we've already licensed 13 times of it. We've got 5,600 of these sites or more across Ontario. And any operator that's employing people and got an existing business, they can keep going and keep moving ahead. Now, we launched this activity in January of this year. We had a study group working on getting ready for the launch for months before, but we launched in January. And the impact and the reception we received has been tremendous. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've been very focused on is getting municipalities to add their voice, because they're often caught in the middle of this. Their residents expect the municipalities to protect the communities from the negative impacts of gravel mining, but yet the province sets the rules that really disempowers them. So we've been incredibly thrilled that we've had so many municipalities that have stepped up and passed motions in support of the moratorium. And so this is a list of it, and we can't even keep the list current. I prepared this just a day or so ago for tonight's meeting on that, but I could add to this list Brock and Mulmer as 2 more Ontario municipalities. So we're up to a total of 18 in Ontario that have passed these motions. We're absolutely thrilled with that support. You can also see the public. 5,800 people, over 5,800 people have signed a petition supporting the moratorium. And 38 communities, as I say, have joined us. And we've had some tremendous media coverage. And I encourage you to go to the Reform Gravel Mining website and check under the media page and look at some of the articles and some of the excellent podcasts that we've had done that really sort of explains this issue. And just recently, I want to highlight in focusing for the upcoming provincial election, we've done some work with a coalition of environmental groups that have put together a questionnaire for the parties running for your vote in June. So if you go to the Green Prosperity website, you can look up their election questionnaire, and question 8 in that questionnaire deals with gravel mining moratoriums. And I'm proud to be able to say to you that 3 of the 4 parties in our province support the idea of pausing new gravel mining approvals until we can get this thing under control. Each of them have their own sort of insight as to what exactly they want to do and how they're phrasing it, but they're all saying something needs to be done before we issue new licenses. Now, the sad part of that is that the one party that hasn't responded or given us any indication of what they've done, frankly, they've ignored us as a coalition throughout all our work, is the current government, the Provincial Conservative Party. So it's frustrating that we can't get them to come to the table, but let's keep the pressure up and see what we can do. And I certainly encourage you, when you go to vote in June 2nd, that you keep what you're hearing tonight in mind. Final slide, if you could, please. You've got a packed agenda tonight with some really excellent speakers covering some really terrific material. Again, I thank you for joining us. Hang in there for the evening. You've got some entertainment and music. It'll be a great night. But we need to do something about gravel mining in Ontario. It's a broken system, and we need to fix it. And the way to fix it is to turn off the tap and stop making it worse. So thanks for your attention. Have a fantastic night. And please, let's work on fixing gravel mining in Ontario.
Thank you, Graham. Go
Awesome.
ahead, Kate.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Graham. Your energy always brings me up, and I realize I have like a little bit of a Blair Witch situation happening in my background here, so hopefully that's not scaring anyone away. But now we're going to move on to what are the community groups that we are focusing on tonight in our event. And they're over 5-year fight to stop a massive rock quarry in the north shore of Lake Huron. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Rhonda Kirby, who I secretly think add to her name in my head as the hardest working woman I know in the north shore of Lake Huron. And Rhonda is a founding member of the North Shore Environmental Resource Advocates. And this is a community group, as I said, on the North Shore of Lake Huron that's been working to protect a critical population of Blandings turtles, as well as provincially significant wetlands and other environments from a proposed quarry site near Lake Lozon in the Serpent River watershed. So Rhonda's gonna give us the sort of what's been going on with her fight. So I will turn it over to you, Rhonda. Thanks so much for being here.
Rhonda, I knew I was going to do something. Anyway, basically, Katie introduced me. That's exactly who I am. I'm a member of, initially started as Answer, and we've transitioned to NSERA, and I'll explain that throughout the slideshow. So this is our story. So next slide, please. Okay, so the area in question is unceded land located within Robinson Huron Treaty Territory. An Ojibwe legend tells that a serpent travels along the Serpent River and claims Lake Huron as its territory. The reason the river is so twisted is that it was formed by the serpent as it moved, wiggling its body as it traveled. Now, the wetlands and other water bodies located within the Serpent's Egg watershed are all interconnected. The water from these sources feed into the Serpent River, Lake Lozon, and eventually into Lake Huron. Next slide, please. The proposed quarry is in Serpent River watershed. Darien Aggregates Incorporated has applied for a below water table quarry in the township of the North Shore. If the permit application is approved, the quarry boundary will swallow approximately 110 hectares, not including the access road, which will require approximately the same land area, some of which is also sensitive habitat. Next slide, please. Some of the environmental issues, obviously, are that the project involves 5 species at risk: 3 turtle species, the whippoorwill, and the Myotis bat. Next slide. The project will destroy a wetland complex comprised of provincially significant wetlands and other neighboring wetlands. Next slide. Oh, sorry, can you go back? Okay. The water management plan is unprecedented on the scale that Darien Aggregates is planning. Water will be pumped from the watershed for 120 plus years. Similar hydro-G plans have only been attempted on a much smaller scale over much shorter spans of time. Next slide. Moose aquatic feeding areas will be impacted, and with moose populations declining, this is a real cause for concern. The fluctuating water levels will also impact the overwintering sites of the Blanding turtles. Contaminated water from quarry operations will affect ground and surface water and flow into the surrounding watershed. Next slide. Rehabilitation is a real cause for concern. It will result in 2 man-made lakes. The time to fill naturally or by pumping manually will affect water levels of neighboring water bodies. Again, similar rehabilitation plans have only ever been implemented on a much smaller scale. Based on the track record of aggregates in Ontario, it's more than likely that this project will be abandoned long before rehabilitation, which could be up to 400 years. There's also no clear long-term regulatory oversight. Aggregate companies are expected to self-regulate and report spills and mishaps on their sites. And recent changes to the ARA allow them to make changes to previously approved site plans. They're self-filed and they're moving targets. They can change without notice. Next slide. In 2016, NSERA was formed. A very small group of local concerned citizens, we were determined to at least minimize the impacts that this quarry would have on the environment. Our first real challenge was to oppose former council's intent to have the area rezoned to allow for mineral extraction. When we lost that battle, we stepped into the legal arena through the LPAT, Local Planning Appeal Tribunal process, which is now the Ontario Land Tribunal as an incorporated group in NSERA. During all of this drama, we were fortunate to become involved in the discovery of one of the densest known populations of Blandings turtles in the province. Next slide, please. Dr. Jackie Litzkus, professor of biology at Laurentian University, was approached to assist the Northern Ontario School of Medicine with a summer work program in which students would research and collect data in the area of the quarry. Dr. Litzkus specializes in the study of turtles and other reptiles and is renowned for her work in the field of conservation. The Blandings turtles at the proposed site were to be tracked and monitored to identify critical habitat. Gabriela Zagorski, graduate student at Laurentian University, was hired to head the project and research began. Along with her amazing team of researchers, Gabby hit the turtle jackpot. At the end of the first, it was apparent to all parties involved that the findings were significant. Needless to say, the proponent, Darien Aggregates, wasn't happy. They knew that the findings could affect their quarry plans, and they didn't waste any time lashing out. You can sit back up, sit in the sun. They resorted to bullying tactics to get the scientists to discontinue their work. It painted a very clear picture of the type of people that we're dealing with. But there is no backing down, and after 2 years of field research, Gabby's research was peer-reviewed and published in a scientific journal. Next slide, please. Shortly after publication, our story hit the front page of the Globe and Mail. The media attention was amazing, and it brought our story to the public. Next slide, please. Although Darien Aggregates has a memorandum of understanding with First Nations, final consultation has not taken place. In the meantime, a partnership was created between NSERA and Turtle Island Centre, a nonprofit organization focused on environmental research and education. Turtle Island Centre has taken a lead to ensure that lands of the Robinson-Huron Treaty are protected and conserved. Through this partnership, NSERA and Turtle Island Centre have facilitated site tours for members of Serpent River First Nation, local elders, and research scientists. Next slide, please. The process has been an uphill battle from the beginning. We've gone up against our local council and the province, and changes to environmental legislation and the Aggregate Resources Act have repeatedly derailed our efforts. The worst has been the recent amendment to the Endangered Species Act, the introduction of the Pay to Slay Conservation Fund. If this permit is approved, the fund will allow the proponent to pay and walk away. No responsibility to compensate for the destruction of identified critical habitat for the Blandings turtles at this site. Next slide. NSERA and NSERA have been at this for over 6 years, and despite the pitfalls and frustrations, we can be proud of so many accomplishments. We established partnerships with Wilderness Committee. Katie, you've been amazing at everything you've done to help us. Involved with eco-justice, environmental defense, gravel watch, dealt with Gord Miller, former ECO, Turtle Island Centre, and Northern Ontario School of Medicine. We worked hard to develop a website, fundraised through the GoFundMe, applied for grants through McLean Foundation and ELSA, involved with Turtle Island Centre. We were fortunate to have obtained David Donnelly as our legal counsel for the Ontario Land Tribunal. And a very important accomplishment is to have joined forces with the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. Oh, I lost my place. We're a small army, but we make a great team. I'd like to thank all of you who have worked so hard and contributed to our efforts. There are too many to name right now, but we could never have gotten this far without your support. And I'd like to make a very special thank you to our next guest speaker. Gabriela Zagorski is referred to in our small circle as the turtle whisperer. She could woo those turtles right into the canoe, my husband Tom would say. Her master's research focused on categorizing Blanning's turtle habitat at the site of the proposed quarry development. There's no doubt that she and her amazing team of researchers achieved the results that they did due to her determination, perseverance, and love for what she does. Gabby was recently the Nature Reserves Coordinator at Ontario Nature, and she has just recently taken a position as Restoration Project Technician at Conservation Halton. Gabby is not just an outstanding field researcher and scientist. She is a warm and caring friend, and we think of her as part of our family. So welcome, Gabby.
Rhonda, that was so sweet. Way too nice. But yeah, hi everybody. So my name's Gabby, and yeah, Rhonda did a really great job introducing me as well as our project. And so I can kind of get started with my story. It's a little bit different than everybody else's here. So again, as she explained, I came on to the project as a master's student, and our actual initial plans were to work with the proponents in order to offer the best possible mitigation strategies to protect Blanning's turtles in a proposed quarry site. And as you kind of found out, and I'll talk about during my presentation, things didn't really go as planned. And I'll kind of get into that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I just wanted to show you some pictures of our site, and I want to start by, again, I know we have done a land acknowledgement today, but again, acknowledging Sagamok, Mississauga, and Serpent River First Nation. So this work was conducted on Robinson Huron Treaty land, as Rhonda and others have mentioned. And during the time of research, we actually visited the site with local First Nations. We took part in land ceremonies, and we showed youth in the communities how we were conducting this research. Next slide, please. So again, I'm just showing you some site photos. So the site was typical for Central Ontario with granitic ridges, wetlands, and depressions, as well as mixed forest. Next slide, please. This isn't everyone that helped me on my project, but I always do like to acknowledge the people that it takes to do this kind of research. I could not have done it without them, and many, many others that I don't have time to mention today. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to get too into the weeds of how we kind of did all of our research because I only have 5 minutes. Again, just let me know if I'm running short. But basically, the goal of the project was to categorize Blanning's turtle habitat. And the reason that we're looking at both provincial and federal is because the site is actually technically located on provincial crown land, but the land is First Nations treaty land. Like I said, Robinson Huron Treaty land. So it could also be argued that the land is governed or should be governed federally. And so for both provincial and federal governing, there are two different categorizations for Blanning's turtles. I won't get too much into it, but basically there is nesting, overwintering, and then seasonal habitat for our provincial. And then in our federal, it's basically just critical habitat with a huge buffer. So federal actually offers a little bit better protection for our Blanning's turtles than the provincial. Next slide, please. And so the project goal was to apply endangered species legislation to ecological data that we collected on these turtles in order to inform decision-making about resource extraction, AKA should there be a quarry in this area or not, based on the presence and abundance of Blanning's turtles and the protection that they have both federally and provincially. And so we were looking at how many turtles were there on site, where were they moving, what spaces are ecologically important to them, so like nesting and overwintering sites like I mentioned, and what are the challenges with this type of research. Next slide, please. So getting right into the data, as Rhonda mentioned, we did find a lot of turtles. It was insane. I've done a lot of turtle surveys in my life, and at this site, it was almost as if you could just walk into a wetland and you would find one. So during the studies at the impact site, which is the proposed quarry site, We captured 56 turtles with 31 recaptures. Our population estimate was about 80 turtles, and the density was about 1.84 turtles per hectare. Like Rhonda mentioned, this is one of the densest turtle populations in Ontario. If you actually look at the Coast-Seawick document for Blanding's turtles, it is the second densest population in Ontario. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just getting into some of our nesting surveys. So we actually attached these GPS loggers onto our Blanding's turtles to see where they were going in order to identify nesting sites. And we also used trail cameras, which you can see a photo of a Blanding's turtle nesting in a rocky outcrop at the bottom in order to see where these turtles were nesting. And so during our study, we actually found 15 nests. For those of you that haven't done fieldwork in Central Ontario before, this is an absolute miracle. It's very buggy and difficult to do this kind of work. So the GPS loggers really helped us in finding these nesting sites, which again are critical habitat for Blanding's turtles and category 1 for provincial habitat. Next slide, please. Then during our study, we actually found 14 wetlands that housed overwintering turtles. 39 turtles were found at the impact site over the 2017-28 winter, and 30 were found at the impact or quarry site during the 2018 or 2019 winter. Just some fun facts, 71% of them returned to the same wetlands to overwinter, and 13% overwintered where no other turtles were observed overwintering. So we did this by using different types of trackers called radio transmitters, which we would attach to these turtles that basically allow you to receive a radio signal with a receiver that's just in the form of a loud beep that gets closer as you get closer to the turtle you're looking for. And it allowed us to locate where these turtles were under the ice in the wintertime. So that was really cool. You can see a map of where these locations were at the top of the screen, the top right, and then the bottom right is actually a photo of not one, but 2 Blanding's turtles located under about 5 millimeters of ice that I found in the spring while doing some radio tracking. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's get right to it. So using all of the data that was collected during my research, I actually mapped all of it together and created a provincial habitat categorization map using the lowest categorization for their seasonal habitat. So again, I didn't really get into it, but basically the way that provincial habitat categorization works is for their seasonal habitat, the proponent can actually choose what distance of buffer to use. And so most of them choose the lowest. But anyways, so if we were to categorize using the lowest buffer with provincial habitat, 62.6% of the quarry site would be habitat for Blanding's turtles and significant habitat. Next slide, please. So now if we were to use the largest buffer, as I mentioned, the proponents choose. So most of the time they would probably not choose the largest buffer, but 100% of the quarry site would be provincially significant habitat. Next slide, please. And then if we were to use the federal protection, then immediately 99.9% of the habitat would be critical habitat for Blanding's turtles. Next slide, please. So our mapping results indicated that the quarry proposal should be rejected if the spirit of the Endangered Species Act and Species Act were to be upheld. Next slide, please. So upon seeing our preliminary data, the quarry company and their consultants launched a defaming attack on our careers by wildly disseminating and writing accusations of academic misconduct, conflict of interest, and data fabrication. So in simpler terms, they did not believe us or our data and believed that we were making up results. So after several exchanges between lawyers, a letter of apology and retraction of the accusations was received from the consultant, but not from the quarry company or proponents themselves. Next slide, please. So what this research has shown is that we really want to advocate for data-driven evidence-based approaches in these type of studies. Delineating critical habitat is absolutely essential for the protection of any SAR. That's why those critical habitat documents were created. And enforcing legislation during development projects is critical for the conservation of species at risk. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just a quick shot of the article, but Rhonda already showed you. We made the front cover of the Globe and Mail from the research that we've done. Next slide, please. And then I also did publish my research with the help of my co-supervisors, Doug Borum and Jackie Litzkis. And then next slide, please. And then this is the end. I hope I didn't go over my time, but this is a list of not everyone, but almost everyone who helped me during my research. Again, I could not have done it without all of these people and more.
Thank you, Gabby. Wow, Katie. It's hard to, I don't want to repeat anything. It's hard to where to start. Just three things leap out at me. The early on, Rhonda was talking about 120 years. That's 5 generations. That's 5 human generations. Maybe it's 2 turtle generations. I don't know, but 5 human generations. And Rhonda said, pay, slay, and walk away. That's the wrong kind of rhyming couplet. The last thing is I just want to do a little bit of a shout out. There are some people on the call here who are here from Port Colborne who are dealing with Darien Aggregates in Port Colborne, and they're bullies there and they're bullies here. And that's really significant. That's something for us to pay attention to. There's lots more I could say, Katie, but I mean, that was just an excellent presentation and really brought things to life that I hope we can all together keep alive.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I had the chance to visit the area where the quarry is proposed and what they call the honeypot, where all the turtles are, and we found a turtle, and it's just magical, and it's just such a living place, and it's hard to understand how also we're in a climate crisis, we're also in a biodiversity crisis, we're in a province, in a country that pretends to care about protecting endangered species, and it's just hard to understand how a quarry could go on such a special place and with such an endangered species. And so thanks, Gabby. I mean, I think we all wish we had your job or in our minds. And you do important work. And next, I'm going to introduce Ken Mwasije. I'm sorry, Ken, I probably destroyed your last name there. And Ken is a member of Serpent River First Nation and founder of something called the Turtle Island Knowledge Center Project. Which is a really exciting project, and Ken's going to tell us a little bit about it. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Ken.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak, Katie. First, I'd like to congratulate the organization and member organizations that have taken on this challenge on the aggregates and various things that are happening in not just in Southern Ontario, but now have taken place in Northern Ontario. Yes, I am a member. I am from the Serpent River Nation, and I'm a member of the Robinson Huron Treaty, which covers a vast area of land. When I talk about Robinson Huron Treaty, I mean, we're talking from Midland right up to Batchewana Bay, the height of the land, and then back to the Ottawa River. It's quite an area. It's a treaty that I should point out that is an international treaty. Canada was not born at the time that this treaty was signed with Great Britain. And as a result of it, it recognized that as a nation of people, contrary to what the premise that Canada has worked on, that being the doctrine of discovery. Now, that has been challenged in the courts over the years, but it appears, or it is apparent, that Canada continues to act on that premise type of thing. We now that our younger people have been given the opportunity to come through the system or to begin to understand the legal systems that apply here in Canada, they've been able to challenge those things. And you're seeing the playing field is changing dramatically as we see examples of that taking place in British Columbia, where treaties have been mitigation and there's negotiations involved, etc. Canada's taken on a different position. I keep hearing the word Crown land. We regard it as treaty land. We have not transferred title to Canada. We have not surrendered, and we are not conquered. In fact, we've done just the opposite on those things. But that's only coming to light fairly recently. When I say fairly recently, within the past decade or so, these things are changing. And more currently today, we're undergoing different litigation with Canada on the Robinson-Huron Treaty. Now, I can't speak to the Robinson-Huron Treaty. There is a litigation team that is addressing those concerns. We are part of the Turtle Island Center for Excellence in terms of on environmental research and education. So we advocate on behalf of individuals, groups, etc. Just as we stand for the group that we were asked by our elders to participate or assist the answer group in terms of their concerns with the blanding turtle, etc. When we had a chance to research those things, we found things that are just a little bit different, especially when it pertains to the Serpent River watershed. And we have quite a history, me being from the Serpent River. I grew up at a time when uranium was a big thing, and that changed the history and the whole, it changed everything on the Serpent River. It changed the economy, it changed the environment. There's a number of things, and that continues today. So anything that happens out there on the land, we as stewards of the land, the First Nations people, as stewards of the land, have great concern over these things. And we become stronger each day in these courts as we keep moving forward and as new things come to light. And there have been some really, even though the progress may appear small, it does have a huge impact in terms of Canada, Ontario, and the provinces. So again, what I'd like to say is that, certainly we commend your organizations for acting on behalf of the blanding turtle, for being concerned about how your water, how the land is affected in terms of your agriculture. All of those things come into play. It's things that our elders have been saying for years, but now we also have to supply them with the types of data that governments and corporations understand, and that's exactly what they're doing. We are doing in conjunction with other organizations, associations, with universities, etc., to provide them with that kind of data that they need to go to these meetings or go to address these concerns. And I can tell you that we're moving forward on each front on these things. And I think in terms of climate change, we sometimes still are not moving fast enough. So again, I wish I had more time. I'm trying to condense war and peace into a Reader's Digest version of what it is that I'd like to convey to the people that are listening out here tonight. And all I can say to you at this time, how important these treaties are that we have signed with Canada, how important that will play a role in our home, how the water levels, that was one of the concerns going back to the answer group, is not just a blanding turtle, but how that'll affect, again, Serpent River that's already been injured back in the 60s and 70s as a result of uranium tailings spilling into the Serpent River. We have some very strong concerns about the lack of the hydrology that was done in terms of the Algoma area, where the landing is certainly at risk right now. And there's so many other things that we should really be factoring into. But again, I want to keep coming back to how important it is that the courts are changing in terms of how we make our presentations, how important that language is in the interpretation of those treaties. And perhaps it's really, it's so nice to hear your groups saying, we have a concern about the environment. We are concerned about future generations, because the legacy that we leave behind right now is not the greatest things for our children or grandchildren. And perhaps there is still time to make some of those changes if we move quickly enough. I can thank you very much for giving me a few minutes to speak. I hope that I have not gone beyond your 5 minutes. And thank you very much, Katie, for that introduction.
Thanks so much, Ken. I mean, I could listen to you all day of so much knowledge of the territory and passion for, you know, passing on knowledge and growing the knowledge of the youth in the area. And you really bring sort of the larger context of what's been going on in that territory for, you know, the past 7 generations. So we are going to continue on with more speakers, but we are going to have a little bit of a music interlude here, which I'm really looking forward to. And I am so excited to introduce Marly Day. Marly is Anishnaabe Kwe, whose ancestors were signatories to the Robinson-Huron Treaty. And Marly now lives in Sault Ste. Marie. Marly works and advocates for at-risk youth in group homes and in the court system. As an elder member of Grandmother Council, Marly is fully committed to the power of traditional songs, teachings, and ceremonies for healing young victims of abuse, addiction, and exploitation. Which, I mean, I think we're all learning as settlers is very connected to the abuse and exploitation of land. And so Marly's going to share some music with us. Over to you, Marly. Thanks so much miigwech for being here.
No, miigwech. I'm really honored this evening to come on to your Zoom. Last week, Janice came to me. She visited me in my home, and she gave me this tobacco offering. And I accepted the tobacco to come on tonight. And I'd just like to remind everyone that it's also the Missing and Murdered Women's Day today. And I was in an assembly earlier speaking to the students about exploitation and human trafficking. And we, as the grandmother group that I'm in is called Pigadwak Nokmisak. And we've been together for 7 years now. And we get into different issues. And I had went on a walk about 5 years ago with Josephine Mondamin. And she carried the water around the Great Lakes. And I got the opportunity to join her. And one of the things that she taught us was how to make a sacred bundle and to make an offering to the water. And as a woman, we are caretakers of the water. And she has journeyed into the spirit world since. And I was just listening to her granddaughter today. She's in LA, and she was honored with an award, and she travels like all over the world. She's commissioner, Indigenous commissioner for the water. And you know, it's nice to see that those younger generation people, like today, like at the assembly that I was, to see them stepping up and receiving all the traditional teachings, and you know, to take an interest in the land, in, you know, like, it's a concern. It's a great concern that what's happening out there. And as I can recall, Josephine, she says that, you know, the land is being raped, like the Indigenous woman. So I can connect that, like, to, as I was presenting today. And when Janice came to see me, I featured in this play, I think it was about 4 years ago. And I featured the Thunderbird woman. And I was very honored to have that part. My family comes from that thunder medicine. And, you know, we take this very serious. And to get into the natural law, you know, we are not supposed to go beyond 10 feet of the earth, of Mother Earth, because there's life that lives in the earth. And as we all know, like, I too come from Serpent River First Nation, and you know, they have those serpents. They live like underground, and there's lots of sacred animals that come from underground, and they get upset. They're very upset. And you know, with this quarry, like all the quarries going in, you know, this is why, like, there's a lot of things that are happening. Our weather changes, and you know, like, we never used to have like you know, the winds are getting so much more stronger around here, and the climate change is making a difference, because you know, like, those teachings, like Josephine had shared with us, is Mother Earth is getting upset. So, you know, every opportunity that the women have, you know, we go place those medicines and pray to the water and to the earth. The earth is so different, you know, to be when you're on the earth as opposed to being here in the city. it's so important that you are grounded like with Mother Earth, because she gives you that energy that we have. And it's very concerning about, you know, all these quarries that are happening. And I also heard about those turtles. And, you know, like it's so natural that, like, when you see those turtles, they have on their shells, on their backs, they have like inside, like inside the part of that turtle, they have like 13 squares, and on the outside they have 28 squares, and that's a symbol of the moon. The moon, it comes like every 28 days, and in the side shell, but with the 12 months, that's how many moons we have, and it's all a cycle. Everything is cycle. And you know, when we see these cycles changing, it's not good. So, you know, we as women, you know, like we're always praying, we're always putting that tobacco down. That's our life. And, you know, we want that water to stay clean for the 7 generations ahead of us. So Janice has requested one of the songs that I sang in The River Speaks play. So I'll be singing this song at this time. This is my drum, and this is the Thunderbird Woman. In the back, I have like this is I have so much tobacco ties, but I'm gonna take this tie because this is really a special occasion, and I'll tie this in the back of my drum. These are all different types of when people offer me the tobacco. And this one here is my late sister's ashes. She taught me how to sing. She taught me the meanings of the song, and we have different songs like for every ceremony. So like we never just get up and sing. There's a true meaning behind our songs. It's a prayer. So I'm going to be praying for those quarries, for the turtles, for the animals, for the water, for the land, when I'm singing this song. We watch.
Thank you, Marlene. I love the water song myself and I find it so inspiring and so appropriate for what we're discussing tonight. I just do want to let our audience know that we are running a little bit behind this evening as we do have so many great speakers. So I'm hoping that we can invite you all to stick with us if we do go a little bit past 9 p.m. And moving on, we are going to bring up a few more speakers to talk about the North Shore Quarry development. And we're kind of turning to the more political side of things now. And we're starting off with the mayor of the municipality or the township of North Shore, Tony Moore. And Tony has been mayor there for, I think, since 2018 or 2019. You'll have to correct me there, Tony. And looking forward to hearing your perspective on the quarry. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much. Some amazing information there. Yeah, I've been mayor of the township of the North Shore for a period of 2 years. There's a re-election coming up in October. So I got into the situation with respect to Darien Quarry sort of midstream. The previous council had been convinced for various reasons that having a quarry in the municipality of the North Shore would be of economic benefit. There would be monies that the municipality would receive from Darien, and there would be the possibility of employment within the area. So as a municipality, I imagine they looked at that and saw the possibility of improving our tax base. However, as the years progressed, and as people got more information with respect to Darien, and some councillors changed, we have, as was indicated earlier, we have approved the motion to request that a moratorium be imposed immediately in order to prevent the licensing of any future quarries until a study can be done as to the effects of the quarry and the controls that you've got to place on something of this nature, if in fact it is approved. So I've spoken to council, and as I mentioned, they have approved that particular motion. I found it rather interesting that other areas where Darien has been in working or operation, that their behaviors have been less than outstanding or upstanding. To attack university students on their particular report, etc., and to try and drag them through the mud in order to improve their own status, to me is it's typical of a bully. A bully raises his or her self-esteem by putting other people down, and to some extent, Darien certainly is doing this. There has been some threatening involved, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go beyond that, though, and take a look at the economy. It was mentioned 13 times the amount of aggregate required. And so I had asked the question of one of the representatives from Darien, and I said, where are you going to be selling this particular product? And he indicated that it was really none of my business. And I said, I think that as a municipality, we should have some idea as to how this operation is in fact going to work. And part of that, in my particular situation, my request was to find out where the market would be. And I found out that a portion of the market, a substantial portion of the market for the aggregate, for the dye-based aggregate, was to be the United States. So here we have a sample of the hewers of wood and drawers of water, and our product, in this case aggregate, is going to be shipped to the United States for use there. And the government, the conservative government, in a way, has tried to utilize, in my opinion, has tried to utilize COVID and the economic downturn, and they're utilizing that argument to unfetter any movement as far as quarries are concerned. They don't have to do nearly as many of the things that they were required to do previously. So they've been given more leeway, the ability to make a lot of decisions where the municipality has little or no impact. And if we're going to have within this area a quarry, then at the very, very least, we need to have the ability to control when the blasting occurs, the noise level, the tonnage, the damage to the roads, the damage to the water within this area, because eventually there's going to be a leaching of that product into the Serpent River and into Lake Lozon and finally into Lake Huron. So it's just a very poor attempt at improving the economy, in my idea, for the North Shore. You're taking you're damaging endangered species, you're damaging a pristine area, you are damaging water because you've got a quarry that's below grade or below the water table, etc. So all sorts of damage for questionable return. So if we have a scale, then it certainly is far more in favor of not allowing this quarry to take place. And as I mentioned, the government is making things easier for quarries in the hopes and under the pretense that this is the way we need to go because we have an economic downcline. Well, it's interesting that the Conservative government, and I didn't know that, hadn't gotten back to a lot of the information that has been presented today. But it's interesting because I attended a number of RTO meetings, which is the Retired Teachers of Ontario meetings, and they had seniors issues. That was their particular concern. The interesting fact is, though, that the Conservative government was the only government that didn't have representatives at any of the workshops that I attended. So it is, it's like a lot of things. They give you the impression that we need your feedback, we need your input, we need your expertise, etc., and then we'll go alone on our own decision anyhow. And basically, that's what's happening. So our council is not totally against the quarry. There are some council members that are still hoping that it can be a flourishing situation for our economy. But I think that when you take a look at the Darien and how it has worked in other areas, and the fact that we do not need at this time aggregate for our roads or for cement or any other of the other uses, it just seems to me that it's absolutely ridiculous that this is even considered. The Blanding's turtle, the species at risk, the other 4 species at risk, you would think that alone would be able to squash that. But of course, greed and financial manipulation and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it, with business in some cases, unfortunately has reared its ugly head here and wants to get this quarry going. And there are a lot of people in the area, and of course you've heard from Rhonda, who is a marvelous spokesman in opposition to the quarry, and the council that is pro the moratorium. Certainly, all of them were in favor of that, except for one. And then, if you go beyond that, I think that the majority of people here, the majority of council as well, are not in favor of the quarry being established within this particular area. We have a pristine area. We can improve the economy in the area by improving tourism, by utilizing nature, the environment, etc. There are many ways where we can team up with and in partnership with other groups of people without, as the term had been used before, without raping the land. So I ran my campaign, and one of the most important issues there was that I was opposed to the quarry, and I continue to be opposed to the quarry. And I think that as a nation, we have to start to realize that there are some pretty marvelous things that exist within Canada and also obviously within the municipality, and we want to protect those things for future generations. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Tony, for speaking to us. And we're going to move on next to, next up we actually have David Donnelly. And David is a well-known, fierce environmental lawyer with Donnelly Law, and has actually been representing Rhonda and the North Shore advocates at their Ontario Land Tribunal hearings. David has a lot of experience with aggregates and law around aggregate extraction. So over to you, David. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you to all who have joined. I have a PowerPoint presentation tonight. I intend to be very brief. First, it is an honor to be sharing the evening with so many people who are so committed to protecting our precious earth from aggregate extraction. Graham is exactly right. We're well beyond time for stopping the needless extraction of aggregate. That was a beautiful video from Sarah Harmer. She's one of my heroes. Sarah, of course, and Core Burlington are fighting an enormous gravel quarry on the Niagara Escarpment. There's quite a community that the Water Watchers and Mike Balko are putting together, and you're to really be commended for your organizational efforts, tracing all the great movements of the 20th century, whether it be feminism, civil rights, or environmentalism, always starts with the kind of organizing that Mike and the Water Watchers are doing, particularly around the Gravel Coalition. So tonight, I wish to present the North Shore Environmental Resource Advocates, Inc., Bill 132, taking public oversight and aggregate appeals away from municipalities on Crown land. My working title is The Three Heroes, Blandings Turtle, Gabby, and Rhonda. Next slide, please. This is my profile. I could probably summarize it by saying, I find myself endlessly interesting. I hope you do too. Next slide, please. Okay, the proposal was on March 7th, 2016, I applied for what is actually a Part 5 Aggregate Resources Act license, which is significant, which I'll explain in momentarily. On November 5th, 2019, the Township of North Shore voted 3-2 to rezone the land from restricted open space, where no quarries are allowed, to mineral extraction. Several weeks later, the North Shore Environmental Resource Advocates, led by Rhonda Kirby, appealed that decision to the local planning appeal tribunal, which is now known as the Ontario Land Tribunal. Just a few short weeks after that, on December the 10th, 2019, the Ford government proclaimed Bill 132 as law, which has the curious name of an act to reduce burdens on people and businesses. Nothing could be further from the truth. You can have the next slide, please. Now, of course, the Globe and Mail, as you've already heard, famously picked up the story of the Blandings turtle and the significance of this site and the surrounding area. And in fact, has called it a great battle that is being fought. The species itself desperately needs our help. It's an endangered species. If you read the caption there, it says, when ecologists found a haven for Blandings turtles on a patch of Crown land, they waded into a conflict that is testing the Ford government's new policy on endangered species protection. Then things got ugly. Now, you would think that the fact that this Blandings turtle habitat was on Crown land would mean that there was an extra level of protection, because after all, we own the Crown land, not the corporation. We are the stewards of the land that we own. We share that responsibility with First Nations, who should have a great say over public land. And yet Bill 132 guarantees that the opposite is in fact true. Next slide, please. Now, the quarry site I call the Manhattan of Blandings turtles. It's one of the richest spots in Canada. If you wanted to save the turtle, you would save their habitat. And this location of the proposed Darien quarry would be one of the best. Now, according to Gabby, whom you met, the turtle whisperer, this is a very special location. And yet the EA consultants for Darien launched a complaint against Gabby and even Rhonda Kirby for simply allowing scientists to assemble in her yard. This is the kind of strategic lawsuit against public participation, or in this case, a frivolous complaint that is meant to bully people. The Ford government is supposed to be about open government and transparency. They should be against this kind of bullying of residents. And yet nothing has been done against Darien for this outrageous behavior. According to Dr. Litskis, Researchers shouldn't be attacked for collecting data that might protect species in accordance with the law, at risk in accordance with the law. We have the next slide, please. Now, what does Bill 132 actually do? The bill grants aggregate companies greater flexibility to dig below the water table, even when it goes contrary to sound advice. According to the Green Party, once again, the government is taking authority away from scientists and putting it in the hands of politicians, putting ideology over evidence and private interests over safe water. Ontario already has some of the weakest aggregate rules in North America, and these changes will only make threats to our water supply worse, said Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party. Bill 132 adds to the laundry list of environmental safeguards weakened or eliminated, including Toxics Reduction Act, Endangered Species Act, the Green Energy Act, and the Low Carbon Economy Act. We can have the next slide, please. Okay, now, everyone knows that Section 12 of the bill changed the right of municipalities to restrict the depth of new quarry extraction below water table. Why that is a good idea, I have no idea. No municipalities were asking to have that right or that power to be taken away. But what not everyone knows is that the bill also removes the right of municipalities to zone or rezone land to prohibit quarries on Crown land. Now, in Southern Ontario, that is not such a big deal, but in the North, of course, this is a huge deal. Municipalities are often the frontline agents for protecting the rights of residents, whether it be from noise, dust, traffic, or any other of the environmental externalities that afflict people who live near quarries. Now, what was surprising is that when we did our research in order to challenge the motion brought by Darien to dismiss NSERA's case, Rhonda's case, we realized that nobody had in fact asked for this change. It was not in fact debated in the House during the debates over the passage of Bill 132. Now, the problem is that these permits on Crown land now cannot be appealed. And so what Bill 132 does is it removes the right of the public to appeal new quarries on Crown land. This is an astonishing and frightening outcome. In the province of Ontario, Crown land represents 87% of all our land mass. That's an area greater than the size of Texas. And we have now just handed that over to the Ford government and to aggregate companies without the right of either municipalities or the public to have the right of appeal. This is shocking and unprecedented. Now, in the rest of Canada, people are waking up to the realization that we need to include First Nations and the public in environmental decision-making. On Prince Edward Island, the Legislative Assembly recently voted to change the name of the Confederation Bridge to Epigwit to respect its Mi'kmaq heritage. When we think about Crown land, I often ask, why is it that it is held exclusively in public hands? I had the great pleasure of helping to create the trial of David Suzuki, which imagined an end of oil. As part of that exercise, I drafted a prescription whereby we would give back 50% of Crown land to Indigenous people and see how they manage the resource, because it couldn't be much worse. That is a proposal that is worth exploring. And lastly, why is it that we call it Crown land? Is the royal family in England someone that we really admire still? After hearing that beautiful music, I propose tonight we start the debate to rename Crown land Marlene's land, or something much like it. Now, in response to Bill 132, Darien brought a motion to the Ontario Land Tribunal to dismiss the appeal, Rhonda's appeal of the Darien quarry. That was heard by the ministry, and we are awaiting a decision. But if in fact that appeal is successful on the part of Darien, which was supported by the ministry and the township, I might add, then there will be no appeal of this aggregate quarry, puncturing the sanctity, the sacredness of that Blandings turtle habitat and the greater, wider world of our Indigenous friends. We're waiting for a decision from the Ontario Land Tribunal, but we shouldn't wait to take action to reverse the incredibly destructive impacts of Bill 132 that rips the heart of public protection out of the management of aggregate resources on Crown land, which is about as foolish a thing as I have ever heard. So congratulations to Gabby, to Rhonda, and to those Blandings turtles. You're three of my heroes, and I hope that we will be fighting together into the long distance future. Thank you very much. Those are my submissions.
Thanks, David. I think you can rest assured that you are on several of our, or many of our hero lists as well for your amazing work. And I mean, hearing it from the perspective of law, always makes me just realize how shocking and important some of these cuts to public and environmental oversight have been over the last few years. And I mean, it's just something that, you know, this case is such a good example of, and brings into stark sort of world day-to-day understanding, but it's something that, you know, goes beyond this case as well, and you know, needs the public to have more awareness of. And we do have a couple more speakers, but I do want to let folks know that at the end we will be sharing some ways that you can take action to support the North Shore environmental resource advocates and their case, and reach out to this government and let them know that approving this quarry would be against the public interest, and that you support the opposition to it. Who do we have up next, Mike?
You're putting me on the spot. I think it's Ray Owl. Am I right about that?
Let's see. Oh no, we have another politician actually. We have a video from actually the area MPP, Mike Mantha, who has actually been a great supporter of the Blandings turtles. I do believe he's taken pictures with Blandings turtles on his shoulder. He's been out there with Gabby and the scientists on site when they were doing their research, and he's prepared a message for us.
I think, Katie, we saw earlier that, oops, go ahead.
Hi, Rhonda. How are you doing? And how is everybody doing with your gathering that you're having this weekend? I just wanted to say hi to everyone. Hope you have a fabulous gathering and that you share some very fruitful discussions, and you share a lot of good information, particularly from our area. And I know from personal experience, the gem that we have in Northern Ontario, just the bounties of resources and wildlife that we have here, our wildlife habitats, our wetlands, our Blandings turtles. I've been known to having a few of those Blanding turtles crawl over my shoulders. Anyways, I wanted to give you a message in regards to our positioning in regards to aggregate resources and the need for them. Yes, there is a place and there is a need for aggregates in Ontario for building houses, infrastructure, and so on. However, this is the however, what we really do need is an evidence-based strategy to govern new aggregate pits and quarry approvals. We need greater engagement from the public. We need greater oversight on government decisions. We need greater participation from municipalities, Indigenous communities, leadership. Our youth, who are going to be very much impacted, what we do today, we need to be mindful that those resources are there for 7 generations to come. So, in fact, in Ontario, we have enough aggregates And right now, what we need to challenge ourselves with is, do we need any new pits? Do we need more aggregates? So that before we go ahead and approve or issue more pits or more quarries and more aggregate development, what we should be doing is developing a science-based aggregate strategy to ensure that long-term supply is there, justified as well, but we also need to be protecting our farmlands, our groundwater, and our environment and our endangered species. So part of the NDP government, when we do form government, we will develop this strategy in consultation with industry, with community stakeholders, indigenous communities, municipalities, scientists, and a lot of other experts. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is really encouraging industry and builders and developers to looking at recycling the present aggregates that we have available to them right now. One thing that we won't do is build unwanted roads and highways. Particularly one that comes to mind is the Highway 413 that the Ford PC government is looking at introducing, which is the Bradford bypass, which is basically threatening a lot of farmland. And this will actually needlessly drive up the demand for aggregates. So essentially, this is going to be saving community members from Bradford into Toronto. You're looking at probably about 35 to 40 seconds. Anyways, these are some of the things that we're going to be doing and that we're envisioning when we're going to be successful in forming government. Anyways, as you can see, my message is coming from the campaign office right now, and I'm looking at my manager and my team, and it's time for me to go back on the doors. I want to wish you well, and I look forward to getting together again and maybe spending a little bit of time out in those wetlands with the blanding turtles and saying hi again. Have a good afternoon. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
That's a strong commitment, Katie. And I think I noticed earlier that maybe the Liberal candidate for the riding was at the meeting, Tim Vine. So it was good that we're getting attention from the other parties. And it's very important, and as Graham mentioned in his comments, the three opposition parties have all endorsed in their own language a moratorium, a pause of some kind on new gravel mining approvals. And the Conservatives have not. So it is important for people who are listening in and for your friends and families that to vote for a party other than Doug Ford is what's going to protect turtles, protect the environment, and limit aggregate mining in Ontario.
Yeah, and I mean, on that note, our last two speakers are going to sort of broaden the scope a little bit. We've been really focused on the North Shore and that the opposition to that quarry, but we know that there's challenges on the environmental front across the north, and so next we're going to hear from Renee Larson, who is a lawyer from Thunder Bay, Robinson's Superior Treaty Territory. And Renee's going to talk a little bit about his representation of the Trout Lake Cottagers Association and their challenge to a rezoning for a gravel pit in Gorham Township. And I think we have a video for that. So let's hear from Renee.
Good evening. My name is Renee Larson. I'm a lawyer in the Thunder Bay, Ontario region of Northwestern Ontario, and I live at a small inland lake called Trout Lake, just north of the city of Thunder Bay, about 10 kilometers. And we are stuck right in the middle of a huge moraine left by the glaciers many thousands of years ago. And we have so many abandoned gravel pits as well as active operations that I don't have enough fingers and toes to tell you the exact number just in our small area. Gorham Township is unorganized. It has no municipal council, no mayor, no councillors, no one that we can complain to. In fact, the zoning bylaw and official plan that we have comes from an unelected body called the Lakehead Rural Planning Board, who are appointed by the province of Ontario to administer the Planning Act in our area and other adjacent areas. So that official plan and zoning bylaw are favorable, as are all the policies under the Aggregate Resources Act of Ontario and its regulations and its policies of the Ontario government. They all favor the aggregate producers and say that they don't have to justify any need for extracting gravel. They just have to show that it's there and they can take it without too much damage to the people around the proposed pit. Well, the Aggregate Resources Act came into play in our township on January 1st, 2016, when the Ontario government, under pressure from local residents complaining about existing aggregate operations, as well as blasting of quarries. And finally, the government responded by bringing in the Aggregate Resources Act to protect us. Well, it doesn't do anything to protect the residents. Let me assure you that the Act is strictly in favor of the producers and the attitude of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to administer the provisions of the Act and regulations and policies is nothing less than rubber stamping proposals to come and dig out the aggregate. So we residents at Trout Lake have fought at the OMB in 1982 and won. And similarly in 2020, we won another hearing at LPAT when Lempiala Gravel and Sand tried to change the zoning to allow the aggregate extraction. So now they're back again in 2022. There's nothing against these multiple applications. They can just keep on bringing them to rezone the property and to seek an aggregate extraction license under the Aggregate Resources Act. In fact, we expect that we will eventually sock it out at an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing for both the zoning and the aggregate license. Well, we're opposed, and we need better regulations and laws in Ontario to protect residents like those around Trout Lake from bringing a new gravel pit into production immediately adjacent to the lakefront properties. So that's why we're supporting the efforts of the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition, and we want to work together with that group whose rally we're at tonight to influence the government. As a matter of fact, we want to influence the election of people who will recognize that the gravel extraction industry has gone too far. The regulations are too much in their favor, and we have to bring that pendulum swinging back the other way and probably past the center in order to protect the people. So I'm here to encourage you to support the efforts of the Gravel Mining Coalition, both in fighting against new aggregate pits as well as bringing in tougher regulations against existing gravel pits. So get out, support their cause, help us in the election, and good luck to you. We're at Thunder Bay to help you and to give you our experience should you call upon us in the future. Thank you very much for this opportunity of presenting to you this evening. Good night.
Well, thank you, Renee. And it's good to be connected, and we are going to reach out, and you've reached out to us, and we're going to reach back, and we're going to work together.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a big part of the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition's strength, is kind of connecting all of these struggles from across the province that, you know, have their differences and their local challenges, but connecting those to learn from each other and help each other navigate through, you know, what is really complicated business. So thanks for that powerful words from Renee. And we are coming to our last speaker. We have Mark Leschetjen, and we're moving a little bit to the west here. Mark is a member of the Concerned Citizens of Michipicoten Bay on Lake Superior near Wawa, also Robinson Superior Treaty Territory. So I'll pass it over to you, Mark, to tell us your story.
Yes, hi there, everybody. Good to meet everybody here. I think I've met some of you before, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to share our story. This story goes back 20 years, back to 2002. And yes, that really is a caribou there swimming in Michipicoten Bay. That picture was taken by the lighthouse keeper that used to man the lighthouse here in the bay. That was taken in 1989. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any caribou in the area since about the mid 90s, but the area west of Wawa is still designated as a Lake Superior coastal caribou habitat range. So there is still some hope that perhaps one of these days this caribou will come back to the North Shore of Lake Superior. Next slide, please. Just to give you some context about the location, we are in Wawa. Some of you some of you from out of province, if you're attending, may not know where that is. It's about 225 kilometers north of Sault Ste. Marie, and right on the northeast shore of Lake Superior. And to show the where the location of the property was, it's that red area, or the purple area, I guess, identified with the red box. And the SAC stands for Superior Aggregates Company, which is the name of the company that was proposing to develop develop the quarry. Next slide, please. Just to show you, Michipicoten Bay is, of course, it features a lot of values in terms of like recreational values, tourism values. There's a popular fishery there. There's an annual salmon derby. There are beaches. And of course, there is a tourism outfit located on the bay at the mouth of the Michipicoten River, which caters to tourism and takes people out on kayaking excursions on Lake Superior, and does a lot of shuttling of people who take the usually do the run from Puckasaw National Park to Wawa. There are also, you see migratory birds here all the time. We know that there's a family of peregrine falcons hanging around because we hear them every year. So it's there are a lot of values to us here with the connection to Lake Superior. And also should note that Lake Superior does contain 10% of the fresh water of the planet here in the one lake. And Lake Superior is known as the least polluted lake and the largest of the Great Lakes. And it should also mention too that the site here that where the quarry is being established was a former industrial site that was abandoned in 1996 when the local iron ore mine closed up. The site was used as a port to bring in supplies to the former iron ore mine, supplies such as limestone and coal. Next slide, please. And just to point out here, the area is ringed by several protected areas. We call this area the probably last remaining wilderness coastline on Lake Superior, stretching from Puckasaw Park all the way down to the south end of Lake Superior Park. The area includes 4 provincial parks, 2 conservation reserves, and of course, 1 national park, Puckasaw National Park, as I've mentioned. The next slide, please. And just give you a graphic here of the area. This is kind of like an aerial view looking probably about maybe, I don't know, maybe a kilometer up, 1,000 meters up, and looking towards the southwest, just to show you the ring of protected areas that surround Mishcotton Bay. The yellow star there designates the area where the quarry is. And there are cottages also and homes located on the bay too as well. So there is a resident population of people down at the bay as well. Next slide, please. Okay, just to give a quick history, we were formed as a nonprofit organization in 2003. We were an organization concerned about the integrity of northeast shore of Lake Superior. We enjoyed members locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally because of the location of this quarry on Lake Superior. Of course, we share Lake Superior with our neighbors to the south. And so there was a lot of concern about this establishing this large quarry, which is the first large quarry of this kind right on the lake shore of Lake Superior. This and the proposal itself was the Superior Aggregates company is actually based out of the United States, out of the Detroit, Michigan area, and they were looking to ship, similar to what Mayor Moore mentioned there. They wanted to ship 2 million tons per year from this quarry to the U.S. And I guess they were looking at setting up a similar operation to what we see now at the Ontario Trap Rock Quarry near Bruce Mines. Next slide, please. And one of the concerns we had, and this is presented by this slide here, is the wider implications of establishing this quarry. We found out during our research in fighting this campaign, we found that the Ministry of Northern Development Mines at that time, which was a sister ministry to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, they had actually done a study where they had actually identified 15 potential quarry sites along the north shore of Lake Superior, stretching all the way from Sault Ste. Marie to Thunder Bay. And our concern was that this was going to be the domino effect, that once one quarry got established, then it was going to open up the door for more. So I guess this is why we were able to successfully carry out a broad campaign and get broader support against this quarry, because people understood the implication of this quarry being established, which could lead to even more quarries being established along the North Shore. Next slide, please. I'll just go through this slide real quickly. Initially, this site was not covered by the Agri-Resources Act. It's on private land, but it was not within the areas that are designated under the Agri-Resources Act. So we were campaigning to have the area and the project assessed under the Provincial Environmental Assessment Act. It actually did make it on the Environmental Bill of Rights Board, for public response, and 80% of the people who did respond favored to have an environmental assessment done. But the MOE in the end decided not to do that, and they decided instead to ask the province to extend the Ag Resources Act to cover 10 townships around the Wawa area, so that the ARA would look after this. Next slide, please. And as mentioned by our other speakers, we went through the same situation like they have experienced in the North Shore quarry. We've had to go through rezonings and battling with our local municipality. In our case, nobody in the local municipality supported us at all. We were on our own, and we ended up. Actually, we did end up in court in one piece or one stretch where we had to take our municipality to court because they refused to hold a public hearing over a zoning bylaw change, and we actually won that case, and the municipality ended up having to pay all of our costs for that case. Even though we offered to settle out of court, they refused to do so, and we won the case anyways. But in the end, though, we did get our hearing, and they were successful in getting the zoning changed to accommodate the quarry. Next slide, please. So eventually, we did go to have an Ontario Municipal Board hearing. That was the process back then. That occurred back in 2009. And just a slide here to show some of the shortcomings that we found with the hearings and the process under the Ag Resources Act is that it allows piecemeal approvals, and we also found that it doesn't address a lot of serious issues outside of the scope of the Ag Resources Act, which is outside of the 120 meters. And you have to picture the fact that this quarry is located only 60 meters away from the shoreline. So there's all sorts of impacts in terms of visual impacts on residents whose homes were just across the bay from the quarry site. Also impacts on tourism, and also there's a fishery there, and there's actually a Lake Superior spawning site just off the dock where they were proposing to establish this quarry. And of course, none of these issues were examined by the OMB. So, and in the end, at the end of the hearing, of course, we were not successful in having the license not issued, but we did manage to have some parameters imposed on the quarry license itself. And also, I guess one other issue I wanted to mention too that we were concerned about with this being a shipping proposal where most of the material was going to be transported by ship from the site to locations in the US. And one of our biggest concerns were the destinations in the US were sites such as Chicago, Detroit, where invasive species are a great concern, such as the goby and the quagga mussels, and other sorts of invasive species, aquatic invasive species are a concern. And as we know, when the ships go to these destinations that have to drop off their product, they will have to take on ballast water at those locations. And our concern was they were going to be picking up invasive species and bringing them here. Mishpatan Bay does not have any invasive species that we know of, but we thought that this was going to be a serious impact on our local waters. Next slide, please. Just to briefly show you, when I was talking about the piecemeal approach, the quarry itself, the proposal that we were dealing with only covered 35 hectares, which is about 100 acres. but the property itself owned by the company covers 1,000 acres, and they had hinted to us strongly that they were looking at also quarrying the rest of the property as well. So we wanted to have the OMB look at the entire property, what the implications were of quarrying the entire property. Of course, that did not fall under the purview of the ARA. Next slide, please. Yeah, this kind of underscores some of the concerns we had with the application only covering 10% of the property. And the key economic social impact were not examined. And the adjacency of this quarry to the lake itself was a big concern with impacts such as acid mine drainage, the impact on cold water fisheries, the fact that they use ammonia nitrate in the blasting, part of the blasting materials, which is very toxic to fish. So we were concerned about the impacts on water quality. And of course, the noise and acoustical issues were not thoroughly addressed. They did not do any kind of detailed visual impact analysis, and any dust impacts were not analyzed at all. And also the impact on threatened species such as woodland caribou were kind of just given short shift and not examined thoroughly at all. Next slide, please. So the license was approved in 2009. Like I said, we did manage to get some restrictions placed on the license itself. And shortly thereafter, the company itself declared bankruptcy, and leaving, actually, it stiffed a lot of people in town who had worked for the company, and they left everybody empty-handed. So we enjoyed actually a 10-year period of peaceful existence, where the site lay dormant for about 10 years. Then in 2019, 2020, it was taken over by new owners. Of course, we were concerned the fact that these new owners, who are Canadian-based, were not very familiar with the background. It being the whole discussion over the quarry having taken place 10 years earlier. And they were unfamiliar with the site plan, and that actually did play out because they had done some blasting down at the site without notifying the public, which was one of the conditions on the license itself, that they had to notify the public before they did any kind of blasting. And of course, that was just an example of that demonstrated the new owner's unfamiliarity with the site plan. And also the other concern we have and continue to have is the the fact that the local M&R staff have changed. There's been a lot of turnover in staff, and they too are unfamiliar with the details of the site plan. So we still continue to have concerns there too as well. There are also other issues we think that are going on that the local ministry is still investigating. There were some things that they were required to do in terms of developing the site, and we don't think those conditions have been met. They're also required to take on or complete some baseline studies, and we believe that those have not been done either, which may explain why there hasn't been a lot of activity down at the site, because we think that the company is in the process of actually carrying on those studies now. So they will not be able to carry on with the operations until they get these baseline studies completed. Next slide, please. Just to give people a little bit of hope, even though the license has been approved there, has been approved we still think that there's a role for us to play in terms of advisory role to the Ministry of Natural Sources and also a consulting role. We want to, we're proposing to meet with the local ministry on a regular basis and to keep the licensee keenly aware of their surroundings and what the expectations are in terms of them adhering to their site plan. Because of the importance of their location relative to all the values here at Lake Superior. Next slide. Okay, and I just wanted to conclude here. I just wanted to mention a couple of things to Mayor Moore. You mentioned that Darien wants to market their material to the U.S. And maybe Mr. Donnelly too might want to jump in on this too as well. But I've often wondered about the provincial policy statement and its conditions. I thought there were conditions in that provincial policy statement, whereas the aggregate resources in Ontario were supposed to be managed for the benefit of the people of Ontario. And I thought that was still applicable in the provincial policy statement. And I wonder how shipping aggregate resources from Ontario to the US is a bit benefit to the people of Ontario. The other thing too are the NAFTA implications. If there's a US partner involved, there are NAFTA implications too as well. If we decide to change the laws here in Ontario, any US interest involved with the company may have a case to sue the governments of Ontario and Canada under the NAFTA. So that's something to be aware of too as well. And lastly, to Mayor Tony Moore, I wish you were our mayor. I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. And if anybody has any questions about our adventure through all of this, you can contact me. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about any of the details. This was a long process. We were battling this company for 7 years. It took a lot of energy out of us, as Rhonda probably knows and her group knows how much is involved. And I did warn her about that when we spoke to her years ago, that this is going to be an energy drainer. But in the end, I think it was a good fight, and we continue to fight.
Good evening. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Without the egg, there would be no chicken, and without a chicken, there would be no egg. We're faced with the same conundrum when it comes to industry versus the environment. Environment is life, clean air, water, and soil. We need industry for jobs and luxuries such as electric vehicles, batteries, smartphones, laptops, solar cells, etc. What comes first, industry or the environment? What good are luxury items or money if there's human suffering or no life? There is a push for electric vehicles in order to circumvent climate change. If the trees are cut down, waterways are diverted, mountains of waste rock from open pits appear where they never existed, heavy metals are disturbed, creating toxic leaching into the air, soil, and water, then how is this supposed to help with climate change? Why would we create more damage to the world, to what the world is working on protecting? Premier Ford is seeking to remove red tape in order to make it easier for industry. Environmental assessments will not be required or enforced. An announcement was made that he wants to push for more industry, but where are these precious metals located? They are found up north in our communities and where there's virgin land not yet touched by industry. The progressive conservative government is looking at taking raw material resources from the north and bringing them to manufacturers in southern Ontario, but at what cost to northern Ontario residents? What are the protocols and protections that will be put in place in order to ensure that industry and the environment can work side by side when there's little evidence that this is presently happening now? Mining is a $3.5 billion a year industry in Ontario, but where does this money go? It is rare to see much government funding given to northern communities located above North Bay, Sudbury, and Sault Ste. Marie. We may see more recent funding coming our way now, since the election is in a few weeks. However, the amount taken out of our environment versus the amount put back into our communities does not appear to justify the cost to the damage made to our environment. Our environment would be further destroyed in order to remove the materials and the minerals, which would then be sent to Brampton, Ottawa, and Port Hope, where they still have their trees, fresh water, and clean soil for processing or refining by a world-class manufacturing section in the South. Minister Rickford stated, "We believe we have an incredible opportunity to connect and vertically integrate our northern and southern economies to build a made in Ontario supply chain for innovative technologies like electric vehicles and battery storage. The far northern cities such as Timmins, Thunder Bay, etc., need to look at growth and development. Why would we send our minerals from our northern communities to the south when the expansion of our economy by building or storing batteries, for example, can happen here, made in Northern Ontario? What is the cost benefit for Northern Ontario when it is our environment being impacted? What are the returns? Apparently, promised regulatory changes aim to reduce the burden and realize cost savings for the mineral development sector and reduce the time an application takes in government processing. This is all good for industry, but where are the protections for the environment and the health and safety of those living in mining communities in the north? The question remaining is, how will these plans help with climate change crisis? New mining, Ring of Fire, for example, will release additional carbon into the atmosphere. Where will the electricity come from in order to power the cars? Build more dams, that would further impact the environment? Build more nuclear plants, more natural gas? Would these not go against climate change initiatives? As Minister Rickford stated, without mining, there is no such thing as a green economy. Without those critical minerals, you will not be able to drive a clean, green automobile of the future. The question is, will any of us be around in order to drive a clean, green automobile if our air, water, and soil is contaminated from toxic heavy metals under the pretense of fixing climate change? What should come first, industry or the environment? The only way that both can work together is by having strict environmental protections in place so that industry is held fully responsible for any damage caused to the environment and or human life. We are not connected to the Great Lakes or the Greenbelt wetlands, which already have protections. We are part of the Arctic watershed. How will these changes impact Hudson Bay and James Bay? Where are the protections to protect our communities in the Arctic? The only color of green in this plan is the color of money. It has nothing to do with our environment and climate change or how it impacts those living further north. In 2019, Brazil's rollback of environmental protections was raised at the G7 summit. The Amazon forest was being burnt to make room for mining operations and agriculture. Why would these concerns be any different for our ecosystems? Thank you.
The quarries, I really don't, they don't do enough studies on them. Not enough. They think just taking a rock, go and pile it up someplace is good. It doesn't. Because when you disturb the environment, how are you going to put it back in place? You don't have a plan. Everybody's, just go pile a rock and you pay your dues to the crown, and you've done it. That's not the case. First Nations is the one that's going to be living here after you guys are gone, and we've got to try and exist in what's remaining.
Do you think that there's a chance? Do you think that First Nations can stop that quarry?
I think so, sure.
How?
How? Just saying no. Say no. This is our territory, and you're not having any kind of development until we're satisfied. Not the government satisfied, we're satisfied. It's a treaty issue. 21 First Nation have to approve it. If it's all right, if it's safe. So when we do something like this, we're not talking about just today's presence. We're talking generations that's going to be coming down the road. My grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and the ones that are not born yet.
Get me out of here.
Hey, I've learned so much tonight. I'm not even going to try and talk about it because it's so late, but I've learned so much tonight, and I'm so impressed. And just the last comment that you're making, Mark, many communities have been in multi-year fights, and it really is incredible. And you're all unsung heroes. David earlier talked about his 3 heroes, but there's a whole province of unsung heroes out there who have resisted and resisted and resisted. And I'm glad it was postponed for 10 years, and I'm glad it's still kind of in a place of limbo, which means maybe something could still happen. But thank you very much, Mark, and everybody tonight for what you've shared. Particularly as a Southern Ontario person, I've learned a lot tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I concur wholeheartedly with what Mike said. I've learned so much, and you know, I appreciate all your work, and I really appreciate, you know, being able to put all of that knowledge and experience that I'm sure you could talk about for weeks and weeks on end into, you know, trying to condense it into a short amount of time is tough. And I really appreciate those efforts. And you know, as a result, we have gone over time. Thanks so much for those of you who have stuck with us, and a lot of you have. So thanks so much. And I think it just proves that these are compelling stories, right? And we need each other to tell them and to listen to them and to act on them. And on that note, I mean, I don't know if our tech people have our actions to share. So, and we will share this in an email to participants. So don't feel like you need to like jot everything down. But we do the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition has a petition you can share, an email you can send to your MPP. You can ask your council, if you have one, a municipal council, to support our moratorium. You can follow us on social media. You'll get a recording of this event that you can share with your friends and family. I mean, spreading the knowledge and spreading the education is so important. We do have a specific action tool that you can take to support and oppose the quarry on the Blandings turtle habitat in North Shore of Lake Huron that we will be sharing as well. And of course, you know, all of these things take resources, right? And you know, when we say David and Goliath, we mean the Goliaths have the money and the power and the money, you know, and so, you know, one way to support these groups is you know, through funding. So we will support a way to donate to the North Shore Environmental Resource Advocates as well. And I mean, you know, I think we'll just, you know, say a big thank you, a big miigwech to everyone for being here tonight. It's been so nice to hold this. It's been close to my heart to hold this like North edition of our town halls and our rallies. And you know, I'm so grateful to have been here and for all of you for being here. Mike, do you want to add anything?
It's actually been interesting to me. The pandemic has kind of forced on us these kinds of Zoom meetings, which really wasn't the way we operated before, but it actually has become an effective tool to meet people, and particularly in, you know, where there's great distances between communities. So there are limits to what we can do on Zoom, but there are benefits. So I'm hoping it was as interesting to everybody tonight as it was to me. People from across Ontario, I know, joined this. And we had planned on doing some fundraising actually in this meeting, but because it's late, we're not going to do that. We're going to follow up, as you said, by email. I think we will put the GoFundMe link in the chat box again, though. So if anybody's motivated now, we are going to save the chat. We are going to send that out to people as part of what you get later. I know Marilyn, I think, is going to give some closing words to us. So I want to appreciate the comments she made before and appreciate in advance the comments she's going to make now.
Okay. Between Katie and I, we pushed every button there is on. Oh my goodness. Anyway, I'm gonna try to be brief here, but I have some things to say that I believe are important. So as a role of the elder, when you sit, your responsibility is to listen to the spirit of the people as they speak about the land, the water, the animals, to the best of their ability within that short framework. There are a lot of things that I didn't hear that would strengthen your material in presenting and knowledge sharing in the two-eyed seeing. And maybe between Katie and I, we can work together that I can present a handwritten or email written, my handwritten notes transcribed so somebody can read them. But your thoughts are good. All I could see through the short films was the world of medicine, natural medicine. And when you look at those things and the possibility of losing it is very hard. But I'm glad that the tobacco that went out and the land that was acknowledged up and down the waterways from the heart of the people, the Bwewan, speaking good way. Laughter that came at the end of this night is our ancestors talking to us, listening and thanking us for what our hearts and our minds feel. The spirit of those tiny flowers that I spoke about when there was daylight have now folded up. Grandmothers covered them up, the ability to close themselves up. And when Moshoma's Jesus reaches the sky, bringing in the wealth and health of the new day, they are given warmth, so they put the petals that kept them warm all night. This happens on the land, but it also happens in the water flowers, that they are able to transition and take care of themselves. But what I'm hearing in the spirit of the people is that they understand, you understand, that they need help to be in the forever. I admire your good spirit as a collective family here, working, thinking the same way. I'm glad that the politicians are not afraid to step forward to advocate for what they're supposed to be. The people won't be healthy if your land that you're given to look after isn't healthy. I didn't hear about the aquifers, and they're there because there's so much to think about, what level, and the anxiety. So I'm asking the grandmothers to make your dreams strong tonight and let you rest with a good heart. For I know that Moshoma's Jesus, that grandfather, will put its arms around you and welcome warmth and wealth of your spirit in the morning. So with that in my nieces, that Franny is going to say good night. Thank you so much for including me in the family circle tonight. Miigwech. Now you can't turn me off.
Marilyn, we never want to turn you off. Thank you, Marilyn. And Katie, thank you for all of your work in organizing tonight. The Wilderness Committee has been a strong supporter, I know, of the North Shore group. And when I had this image when David was talking about the heroes of maybe us carving in some rock face somewhere, some Mount Turtlemore image with all the heroes who protect them. And I think we'll be talking in the days to come about, regardless of what happens next, what people can and will do and must do to protect the Manhattan, the honeypot of landing turtles. Over to you. You're muted, Katie.
All right, because I'm on West Coast time right now, I mean, it's dinner time for me and it's maybe bedtime for lots of you. So I think I'll just say miigwech to everyone and look for the email with all of the links that can, let's keep this going. This is an active meeting that doesn't end, but is points us forward. And thank you, Marilyn, for opening and closing us in such great ways. And good night, everyone.
Good night. I think we have a musical outro for folks, for just to help
musical
you
outro.
Exit the meeting in the right.
Gotta have a musical outro, right?
In a good way.
There's no other way.
If they blow a hole in my backyard, everyone is gonna run away, and the creeks won't flow to the Great Lake below. Will the water in the well still be okay? If they blow a hole in the backbone, the one that runs across the muscles of the land, we might get a load of stone for the road, but I don't know how much longer we can stand.